Rocky Top Insider presents the RTI Rim Runner with Bob Baskerville and Ryan Shumpert.
Welcome. It's time for another episode of the RTI Rim Runner. I'm Bob Baskerville, joined as always by my partner over at Rocky Top Insider and also a guy with some renewed enthusiasm about his Tennessee Titans, Ryan Shumpert. Sorry, Ryan, had to get some Titans stuff in there. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's it's the Titans are really, it's kind of like grading on a curve. The expectations were so low, so it's not even necessarily like I just love to hire and it feels like a sure thing to be successful, but overall happy with it. We'll see if I think Diana Rossini reported that Brian Daboll, if he doesn't get the Bills head coaching job, is going to be the Titans OC. So hopeful of that happening. The Bills owner just making a fool out of himself yesterday. Not helpful because, he's making that job less attractive and making it more possible that they end up getting Daboll. So generally feeling good about Titans.
Yeah, I would agree. I think would have loved to have seen the Titans get Mike McDaniel, but
I wasn't that high on him, so I wasn't as caught up in that storm as a lot of Titans fans were.
Yeah. Well, we're here to talk basketball, and we appreciate you joining us as always. If you're checking us out on video, that means you're on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel, and make sure you like and subscribe if you're there. We appreciate that support. We're also available wherever you listen to your podcast, so make sure you download us on your platform of choice. Again, really appreciate you supporting the show and supporting Rocky Top Insider. Let's get to it. The Vols are off this week, no doubt, working hard to regain some momentum after an absolutely brutal meltdown against Kentucky last weekend. And so we'll talk about that. We'll recap that less than memorable loss by the Vols to the Cats and what it means as far as how we're feeling about this team and the way forward for them, because there's still a fair amount of conference play left and some things have got to get moving in the right direction. I think all Vol fans would agree with that. It's a pretty critical road swing for the Big Orange, too, coming up. We'll talk about that. We'll also take a look at some of the other teams in the SEC and around the country to see how they're doing. We have less undefeated teams than we did when we last talked to you on this show. So we'll talk about that whole path forward. But before we get started on any of that, I wouldn't necessarily call it breaking news, but man, it is timely because Tennessee's opponent this coming weekend is Alabama. The Vols going to Tuscaloosa to take on the Tide. And it appears that the Tide have fortified their lineup as well ahead of this game with the addition of a former player as Charles Bediako, who played for Alabama 3 seasons ago, has left the NBA G League, requested to resume his eligibility at Alabama. And even though the NCAA declined it, a judge has ruled in Bediako's favor for a temporary restraining order. Meaning, by all accounts, Ryan, it sounds like Nate Oates plans to have him on the court against Tennessee on Saturday night.
Yeah, that was a question, I guess, on Wednesday, is the temporary restraining order was granted, is that it didn't seem certain at that time whether Alabama planned to play him or not, or just to wait until they had something a little bit more definitive. It was interesting. I talked to both someone at Tennessee and then, again, someone who covers Alabama, who's been doing a great job following it. He was in Detroit. He was in Michigan with the G League team. Bediako was at practice yesterday with a G League team after the ruling came down.
Wow.
And then, as the Alabama person told me, they're not sure if they're going to play him or not, but a booster has a plane ready to go pick him up and get him to Tuscaloosa if they decide to. So just a crazy situation. It is worth getting mad about if anybody's mad about it. And at the same time, it's kind of like, what can you do but laugh? But just insane, and absolute nonsense, really.
I mean, now to be clear, and you dropped something, I think, on X from your kind of scoping back on some of the things that Bediako's done. I mean, I remember him for playing for, and that Alabama team he played on, the last one he played on, was uncharacteristically by Alabama standards, really strong defensively, right? And he's a big, and that's something that they are lacking at the moment. But I mean, at the same time, the part I struggle with, Ryan, is even though he's coming back to the school and the program he played for, and I mean, I know it's the same coach and everything else, but this is one of the things I actually was texting Coach Barnes last night. And one of the things we talked about is like, how easy is it for you to just get back in and assimilate? Because all those players that are there, for the most part, are not players he's played with.
For sure. And that's, an interesting aspect. I think he'd only played 6 games. Yeah, 6 games in the G League this year. What's his conditioning like? So there's a lot of questions that go with it. And I think some of those are minimized by his strength, what he does well, which is dunking the basketball around the rim and blocking shots, essentially protecting the basket. I think some of those things, especially on the defensive end, your continuity, your comfort level, your ability to play with other players, that's not important or as important when you're, set under the rim and you're asked to play defense. And certainly Tennessee's centers aren't going to make him stretch out and guard on the perimeter as much. Offensively, even just as a lob threat, I mean, you've seen that this year with Jacoby Gillespie and Felix Okpara as opposed to Zakai Ziegler and Felix Okpara. That it's a little bit different and takes some getting used to. But this is a guy who, he was on the Alabama team that won the SEC in 23, number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Brandon Miller, Mark Sears, those were the main 2 guys. I think the only 2 guys that averaged double-digit points on that team. And so, what they asked him to do, what he brought that team was playing a lot of defense around the rim. You look at this Alabama roster, they don't need a ton on offense. They need that rim protection. They need that defensive rebounding. So he fits what they need. I understand the desire to do it if you're Nate Oates. It'll be interesting to see, how productive he can be. Like I said, he hasn't played much in the G League this year. He was a little bit better last year. He averaged 10 and 9 in 34 games in the G League last year. And this year in those 6 games, just playing 15 minutes and averaging 4 and 6. So I'm not really sure what to expect. I don't really expect him to be a game changer on Saturday, but certainly can give Alabama some interior toughness that they've lacked.
I've got to share this one. It just blows my mind, and it kind of speaks to where we are right now. And this was a quote from a college basketball coach. I'll just leave it unnamed for the moment. This was a few weeks ago when James Nagy had signed with Baylor, if we recall that one. That feels like it was years ago, but it was only a few weeks ago. The quote said, "I think it's taking away opportunities from kids coming out of high school. I myself was a high school coach for 11 years. I wanted my kids to get opportunities when they left my program, and this kind of activity is taking opportunities away from those kids." That was Nate Oates. And so now he's got the opportunity with Bediako, and like we said, by all accounts, the plan is he's going to play. I don't know if it's going to be truly meaningful minutes. Time will tell. But as I mentioned earlier, I was communicating a little bit with Coach Barnes last night. It wasn't like a full range conversation. It was just a couple of texts. But he's, as you can imagine, Ryan, he said, Bob, you can't understand how many like calls, texts I've heard from so many people today on this topic. And he goes, everybody's the burning question is, because the NCAA declined this request but got overruled. And now the question becomes, at what point this really becomes, and we've been talking about it, we could spend a whole show talking about it, running the scale between basketball and football and everything else. It feels like there's a flavor of the day with these kind of hearings going on. When does the NCAA really, I don't expect you to answer this. This is more commentary, but when does the NCAA really get a handle on this? Because it feels like They continue to lose the rope. They did it on NIL, and this now, then there was transfer portal, and now there's this new wrinkle. And it just feels like there's some new dilemma coming up all the time. And it feels like the NCAA is typically not in a position of power on it.
No, you're absolutely right on that. It doesn't feel like the NCAA fixing anything is a very viable option at this point. It feels like someone else or something else is gonna have to step in, or something else is gonna have to emerge as some sort of legislation and some sort of, if not governing body, just common sense in the room, I guess. So it's as important. Look, in the short term, very unfortunate for Tennessee. He's going to play a ridiculous situation. I think to me, all eyes from a more greater sport situation, college basketball situation, is on the case next Tuesday, and the very, very dramatic need for his eligibility to be denied long term, because this just opens up a whole new can of worms if it does. And I guess I have two more thoughts. One I'll say on the Tennessee side of things. I guess the rules right now of why he would technically be eligible to play, they would not allow other players to be eligible to play. And again, heck, these rules change by the day, so who knows if rules actually matter. He played 2 seasons, so I've heard people say, well, he has 2 seasons of eligibility. That's not true. This was his last season of eligibility, because once you start your college career, once you leave, either go pro or start your college career after high school ends, you have a 5-year clock in which you can play games. So this is the 5th year for him. So someone like Jordan Bone, who only played 3 years for Tennessee and theoretically has another year of eligibility, never played in the NBA, at least not to my memory. I think he only played in the G League. I'm not sure he ever got any actual game action in the NBA. Could be wrong about that. He would not be eligible because it's been, 7 or 8 years now since he started his college career. And in Kennedy Chandler, that feels more firm because the courts have backed the 5-year stuff.
Right.
In that NCAA ruling. The other part of it is like Kennedy Chandler. This would be his 5th year, technically, which is kind of crazy to think about, that it was only 4 years ago that he played at Tennessee. But he's played in an NBA game. So theoretically, that's kind of been in the James Nananji, or however you pronounce his last name, in the Baylor case. That was a big thing, is he didn't play in the NBA. So they were saying he was eligible. That Kennedy Chandler did play in the NBA. So that would be, I guess, another dividing line. Could that get overruled? Yeah. Obviously, the rules that everybody is playing by changes, very, very often.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I mean, there's the whole other dilemma of, say he gets, again, this gets overruled and he is ruled ineligible. What happens in this game on Saturday if he plays and Alabama wins? Do they truly get credit for that win after the fact? What's that? I mean, there's a lot of implications here. And it just feels like, again, we're sitting here asking the questions. I just worry that nobody at a higher level knows what the answer is either. And I don't know. It's going to be a very, very interesting turn of events to watch after we get through this weekend.
The temporary restraining order explicitly states that the NCAA cannot hold any games played by Bediako against him. It cannot punish him for that. So I think Alabama will have legal protection. I'm sure that was part of what they were, when they were deciding yesterday if it's worth playing him. And that was kind of part of my thoughts. Like, for Alabama, is it really worth the squeeze here to play this guy in a game that you probably should win, even if he doesn't?
Yeah.
They're not playing Michigan on Saturday or anything. And, not that Tennessee's not capable of beating them. Tennessee's not UT Chattanooga or something, but it's a game Alabama is going to be favored by 5 or 6 points to win without him. And then I guess the last thing that I think is just overarching in this case is, European players. I've have a coaching friend who's, since the Njanji situation at Baylor, has been harping on that of these guys, the European guys shouldn't be able to play either. To me, that's just a much more difficult line to draw. I think there's two areas here. Those guys didn't turn down college basketball. Obviously, Charles Bediako played college basketball. The Baylor kid had college options and decided not to play college basketball. Those guys haven't done that. And then youth basketball in Europe, maybe not youth basketball, but as you get up to the high school level, high school age guys play professional basketball in Europe.
Yeah.
So where do you cut? And those guys, but long before NIL, you've had guys come over and play. Santiago Vescovi obviously was not Europe, but kind of the same way. Tennessee had Yves Pons, Olivier Camois. Tennessee had European or international based guys before this, before NIL was making it a lot more attractive to them. So where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line of guys that have played in this high quality league? You can't come play in America, but guys that haven't played, or if you've played in this smaller league, you can. So I think that's the other area that, from a common sense standpoint, everything on people that have played American professional basketball is very simple. You shouldn't be able to play college basketball. That opens a whole other can of worms with what do you allow from in the international scene. And to me, that conversation, that debate is a whole lot more nuanced.
Maybe there's a chance we could get a refund on Ethan Berg if there was a rule. I shouldn't say that. That's not cool. But we have Masamba too. We have a couple guys that played at that level.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Masamba played, and that was a U21 or a U19 team that he played on, so again, a little bit different. But that shows just how many different levels there is. And I've already seen some Alabama fans on X, because Ethan Berg is the same age. I believe him and Bediako are both 23. And, in some sense, I think that's kind of a fair thing to point out. Does Ethan Berg at 23 need to be playing college basketball? I wouldn't have a whole lot of fight back on you if you said no. But, certainly I don't think Alabama fans are going to be too upset if Ethan Berg's playing 10 minutes on Saturday either.
Better not be. I shouldn't say that, but it's like that guy's he's in a slump right now for sure. He even got a few minutes in that game Saturday, which is a good segue. We'll rewind a little, and we're not gonna reconcile this one too much, but I do think it bears a little bit of discussion just because we're looking at kind of the path forward as things take shape in the SEC, and it's looking pretty, I'd say a little daunting for what we're seeing from Tennessee so far. We had the excruciating but victorious win last week against Texas A&M in double overtime, and as painful as it was a win, and it felt like maybe we had kind of beaten something besides the opponent. Maybe it was like, okay, these guys didn't fold in a really, really tough time. And hold that one, because the Vols squander a chance to go 2-0 that week with another excruciating game. But this time the result was a loss to Kentucky. Ryan, I just want to get a couple major takeaways from you. I know you did some of that for Rocky Top Insider. I was at the game. I mean, it was the first half I thought was some of the better basketball I've seen from Tennessee this season overall. I wouldn't say it was like elite and pristine, but it was solid. I mean, the last couple minutes maybe the wheels started to come off a little bit, namely because Jacoby Gillespie and Bishop Boswell both were out with presumed foul trouble. But then that second half was just, particularly at home, it's the likes of which something I haven't really seen in a very long time from a Rick Barnes team.
No, you're right. I think a more short-term comparison, it felt a little bit like the game in Oxford last year, in which, it's like offensively you played pretty well, but you couldn't get stops, and specifically in those two games you couldn't rebound. And so I guess that to me is the overarching theme, is just this team is built to be good inside. This team is built to be a really good rebounding team. It's not as good defensively as past Rick Barnes team, but it's still a Rick Barnes team, and it's still overarching a good defensive team. And that's how they lost the game to me. They were bad in all those areas in the second half. They didn't rebound well. They gave up 51 points, 1.5 points per possession. They got consecutive stops the first two possessions of the second half. Now, granted, I think Otega-Oweh went 0-2 at the line in one of them, so you didn't really deserve that stop. Tennessee got, and after that, they got consecutive stops just one other time. And that's what I think anywhere that would be tough to, really frustrating, tough to fathom, but it's all the worse at home. And this team just has enough flaws on its own. The areas that they are good, the areas that are more, not dependent on shots falling, things that are more controllable. Obviously, they're not completely controllable. So you can't make Kentucky. They shot 50, maybe over 50% from 3-point range in the second half. There's a little bit of bad luck that goes into that, but it's mostly controllables, and they didn't control them, and that's how they lost the game. And I think that's what's probably so frustrating if you're Rick Barnes, and that's what's tough to fathom, because this Tennessee team doesn't have enough room for error to lose like that. And then in a greater, I mean, we've talked about it. Tennessee doesn't have enough room for error to be losing games at home, and really all year, but especially in the month of January with how challenging the 4 road trips are just for Tennessee this month.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at those bigs, and you and I have talked about this. Those bigs, I count 4 of them, right? It's Felix, it's Jalen Carey, it's JP Estrella and Dwayne Brown. In that Kentucky game, in a game where presumably ahead of time you think we're positioned to, I wouldn't say have our way, but we should have the upper hand inside. Yeah. Those 4 guys combined for 22 points. I mean, that's just, it's not good enough, man. I go back to that Texas win, which is now a couple weeks old, but that was one where you saw the inside game just, that we got Vocatitis out of the game for Texas. And so we were able to just dominate underneath. And that's when the promise of that size comes into play for a Rick Barnes team. But man, we sure didn't see it this time. And I mean, that's what my next question to you would be is, for you in that game, who or what was the biggest disappointment in the loss? Was it the front court at large, or was it just Jalen Carey? I mean, the fact that Carey had 12 or 13 shot attempts versus 7 for Nate Ament. Or was it Jacoby Gillespie? Even though he scored points, some incredibly gut-wrenching, untimely turnovers.
Yeah, I think it's the rebounding to me, the rebounding and the defense just as a whole. Yeah, I mean, the Gillespie thing, it was for 37 minutes. I think it was the best game he played at Tennessee. Not just points. He had 8 assists, which I think was close to a season high. He had, at that point, 1 turnover. And then he had 2 very, very bad turnovers, pick sixes, as Rick Barnes describes them. So, that finish was obviously very disappointing, and you need your best player, which Jacoby Gillespie is, and your starting point guard, to be better in winning time. But given how well he played the rest of the game and the fact that Tennessee was leading in large part because of him, it was just hard for me to have him be the biggest disappointment. So, maybe the front court at large, Carey was the biggest disappointment of that group. But again, the strength is in numbers at that position. It's not like Jalen Carey. You expect him to be great every time out. He hasn't shown that level of consistency. So a lot of areas to be frustrated, but the front court and the rebounding, which obviously ties together, to me is, right at the top of the list.
One interesting stat that I heard, I think it was the guys at Field of 68 that came up with it, or maybe Basket Under Review, one or the other. And this was about Jalen Carey, and it's kind of mind-blowing when you hear this, that he currently ranks 11th in the entire SEC in terms of, I'm not sure what the term would be, Ryan, I don't know if it's not usage, but it's like his shot percentage is 11th it's the 11th highest in the SEC. And what that correlated to was 30% of the time when he's on the floor, 30% of the shots are coming from him. And the thing is, he's also shooting 36% from the field, and most of his stuff is at the rim. And I just think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is that just an SEC play?
Just an SEC play.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So when I hear that, it's like, that's absolutely not the frontline offense that Rick Barnes envisioned here.
No, it's, I think the 30% of the shots is kind of understandable, just from the standpoint of they want to get the ball inside and they aren't as good on the perimeter. And JP Estrella is not playing a ton of minutes right now. But he's got to be more efficient. And I mean, that just goes back to, a lot of the shots he missed in that game. He missed 9 of them, I believe, 3 of 12. 3 or 4 of those were, shots he needs to make. Like, I'm not going to just say they're wide open layups and they're, super easy. Rick Barnes always says they're harder than they look, and I believe him. But at the end, they're shots you need to make, and you have less room for error there when you can't shoot free throws. You know what I mean? Like if you're Grant Williams shooting 78% from the foul line, you can live with missing more of those shots around the rim because you're just going to naturally get fouled and shoot more free throws. Well, when you're going 1 or 2 at the free throw line, that's just a fine possession. Scoring 1 point in your possession and the possession's just fine. That's not great. So it's harder to live with him, missing those bunnies around the rim.
Yeah, agreed. The last thing I'll say to put a bow on this is you probably, I know you heard the quote where Barnes mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, if we have Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak, we don't lose that game. And I took it more because I think a lot of people were like, well, I don't know. We've lost to Kentucky. Many can, even in the Zakai Jemai regime. But I didn't take it more. Well, first of all, our perimeter defense is woefully lacking, right? Could not stay in front of the ball. Denzel Aberdeen looked like a first team All-American against us. But I think what maybe Rick was referring to also was just the edge, right? The toughness, because this team, it feels like they're lacking it. I want to be careful with the soft word. I have said it before, but I mean, it does feel like one of the softer Rick Barnes teams I've seen.
Yeah. And I think his quote has gotten shrunk to Zakai and Jemai. Really, it was Santi and Josiah were included in the question. And he said those guys, so he's including them too. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard not to be a prisoner in the moment. You lose games. Those guys lost games on the road, lost games. I mean,
Sure.
The Ole Miss game last year was one where it felt like they were soft, but at home, leading by 17, just folding the way they did. I mean, it's hard to explain just how bad the fold was in the last minute. I mean, even after the Jacoby pick 6, even with him fouling it and it being and 1, you just get the rebound. You're down by 1 with the ball in a game. Your offense has played pretty good, and you got a chance to go win the game with the shot clock off. Or you're probably shooting it early and you foul, and then you're still only down by 3. Like everything just compounded on Tennessee in the last couple, the last 45 seconds of that game, and it's how it happened, and the how and it happened, and the I guess the why and it happening too. Those two things to me is what separated it from a lot of past games.
Yeah, you nailed it for me. The one moment where I finally just threw my hands up in the air was that you're right. It's down 1, but then they missed the free throw and we don't get they get the offensive rebound, and it was just like, come on, man, this is
13 or 14. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was either the 13th or 14th offensive rebound Kentucky had gotten in the second half when they'd gotten 1 in the first half.
Yeah, and only 1 turnover by Kentucky, by the way, in the second half. So our turnover game was actually, the magnitude of the turnovers were awful, obviously, but by number, it was one of the lower games we've had in recent memory in terms of turnovers over the course of the game, but they were still unbelievably costly.
Yeah, they were. I'm trying to find it right now. Yeah, it still ended up being an 18.9% turnover rate for Tennessee, which certainly isn't great, but second lowest in SEC play behind Arkansas game. It was 18.7. And yeah, I mean, that's, I would say, kind of going back to your original point on the game, of the first half maybe wasn't the most pretty. I mean, for 15 minutes, it was really pretty. And it was largely just Tennessee not turning the ball over. I think they turned it over 1 time in the first 15 minutes. And they shot the ball well, too. So I don't mean to discount that, because that was a big part of it. They hit 4 or 5 threes in the first 15 minutes of the game. But they just got pretty solid shots and, ran their offense smoothly without turning the ball over. And the results were really, really good for 15 minutes. But even if you make 3 3-pointers instead of 5 in that stretch or whatever it was, your offense still would have been pretty good. And, I tweeted about it that it was kind of, it just showed how solid Tennessee can be offensively if they take care of the basketball.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was feeling very, very good. Even with us giving a little bit of the rope away in the first half, the lead went from 17 to 11 by halftime. I knew they were going to have to come out and, get it back in motion, but I still, by and large, felt good about that first half. So so as you can imagine, the Vols now are 12-6, 2-3 in SEC play for the first time in what, Ryan, 4.5 years, 90 weeks. The Vols
Yep.
they're not showing up in the AP top 25 poll. They continue to fall in Ken Palm, slipped a little bit in Torvik, Evan Maya, all those things, and it stands to reason. My question to you is, here we are, 2-3 in conference play, still a lot of games left, but the next two up are very, very tough opponents on the road. We talked about Alabama and then going to Stegman in Athens on Tuesday against a Georgia team that has proven they're legit. I'm not saying they're one of the top 2 or 3 in the SEC at the moment, but they're very, very good and even tougher at home. If we come out of that somehow, God, 2-5, I mean, I guess my question to you is, we're still showing up reasonably situated in bracketology projections. Some people have been like, this team's not even making the tournament. I don't buy that, but what do you think needs to happen record-wise in the conference to make sure Tennessee's not in a position that come conference tournament time, they're going to have to go and win like multiple games to cement their status?
I think if you go 9-9 in conference play, you're still probably gonna make the tournament.
Yeah.
And I would need to maybe dive into past history of that too, of what that looks like. But I think with Tennessee's body of work in non-conference play, the Houston win continues to age really, really well. I think that's what you need to do. And yeah, I mean, it's, that's why it kind of continued to say in January, the goal was to defend home floor and then to try to get one on the road. And, I'd kind of say the same thing. If you can just get one of these games on the road, you can really stabilize yourself. After these 2 games, it gets very manageable. Auburn at home, Ole Miss at home, road trips to Kentucky and Mississippi State, and then LSU and Oklahoma at home after that. So you have a 6-game stretch that you very, very easily can go 5-1 after these next two road games, and none of those games aren't winnable. So it's, with, I guess those 6 games, 4 of them are at home, and one of them is against the second worst team you play on the road this season, or in SEC play. Syracuse might be worse than Mississippi State, and you lost that game. So it isn't to say it isn't going to be easy. But you have an opportunity to really stabilize it, and if you can find a way to get one of these next 2 games on the road, a lot easier said than done. I think Tennessee has a chance to head to Nashville on the 21st of February, and all of a sudden be sitting back here right on about the 5 line and not feeling super bad about where they're at. Maybe not feeling great about this team making a run or anything, but things just have a chance to stabilize, especially if you can find a way to make up for the loss in Lexington and get a win on the road. But it's hard to have a whole lot of confidence in Tennessee on the road right now too.
Yeah. And all of that to say, again, I agree with you. I believe Tennessee's got enough to be in the tournament, and anything can happen. I get it, but based on what I've seen from just the landscape of all the teams that will be in the tournament, it's hard for me to see them as a team that makes it past the first weekend. They might, but I just think it's going to be, like you said, if they're situated down around a 5 or 6 seed, that second round game is going to be very interesting for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And look, it could very easily be, 6, 7, 8. And even if you're a 5, it's not like that first game is going to be easy by any means. So, I agree with that. We'll see what happens, but it's right now, Tennessee does not look like a team that's going to be playing in the Sweet 16 to me.
Yeah. I'm afraid that's the case, but I agree with you. I mean, so clearly, do we both agree the most gettable of the 2 road games coming up is Georgia?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, that's definitely in logically or in practice. But Tennessee plays well against Alabama.
They do.
Tennessee never plays good in Stegman, which maybe leads to my skepticism there a little bit. So, I tend to agree.
Yeah. Oh well, there we go. We're both in agreement. I think 9-9 at a minimum gets them into the tournament still. I don't know, 8-10 might too, but again, I think then there's more work to do in the SEC tournament. But we got a lot of games to play.
One thing real quick, if I can find this.
Sure.
Yeah, Bart Torvik's tournicast still gives Tennessee a 98.8% chance to make the tournament.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm surprised it's that high. It doesn't feel quite that. Even though I'm very confident Tennessee will make the tournament, it feels more like 92% chance than 98. But to maybe qualm some concerns there.
Well, one thing we know for sure is the SEC is going to be it's going to be a slog, man. We're seeing it already, and we'll get to a little more on that in just a moment. The big thing today, we did not have the show last week, so a couple of weeks have passed, and at that point, we had 5 undefeated teams in college basketball. Now that number is down to 3. The teams that have been added to the list of teams no longer chasing perfection are Iowa State and Vanderbilt. And then to boot, both of them had multiple game losing streaks. One of them is still in the midst of a losing streak, as a matter of fact. Iowa State, though, they started by strolling into Fog Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas. We know that that's a tough one. You know, they got punched in the mouth by Kansas. That can happen. But then they followed up with another loss on the road to a pretty middling Cincinnati team. Surprised me, Ryan. I mean, we've been talking about Iowa State so much. Again, the Kansas loss didn't surprise me. Kansas is a tough place. They're a tough out no matter what year it is. The Cincinnati game was like, man, I got to believe Otzelberger was just looking at this going, what the hell are we doing?
No doubt. And I mean, really an Iowa State team that's struggled might be dramatic, but sneakily just hasn't been quite as crisp really since they won at Purdue
Right
there in early December. Last 10 games efficiency on Bart Torvik, 48th offensive efficiency, 21st defensive efficiency. So, you know, that's all Big 12 play in a couple games against, you know, bye games in late December that includes at this point. And you know, even home against a not very good Oklahoma State team. I mean, they won that game. It wasn't like it was a dogfight by any means, but they didn't blow them out like they have some other teams. So I'm not sure I'm really on a panic meter as far as where Iowa State's at right now. I tend to think this is more a midseason cold stretch some of these teams run into. But it goes back to our conversation probably a month ago now where you're going to start feeling like these teams are you kind of get to the point of the season you start feeling like some of these teams at the top are invincible, and that's just not the case. They're going to have struggles, and you know that's where Iowa State feels.
Yeah, definitely. And poor UCF, they then rolled into Ames, Iowa, and pretty predictably, man, they got crushed by Iowa State. Knew Iowa State was due to get something going, and they did. So we'll be monitoring that. Now, the other SEC team that was a former undefeated, former number 10 ranked, now number 15 ranked Vanderbilt, they went to Austin last week. And I was saying on the radio, I thought this could be an interesting game just because of what what Texas did to Alabama. And Vanderbilt's going to lose at some point. I just didn't expect it to be kind of a blowout like it was. And then Vanderbilt follows it up with a home loss, really close game against Florida, Florida seems to have cured their ills for the most part. They look really, really good. And then the Commodores just absolutely got mauled in Fayetteville just a couple of nights ago by Arkansas. Ryan, in those losses, my biggest takeaway was the winners, Texas, Florida, and Arkansas, they just big boyed Vandy at every stretch. And all of a sudden, you know, it's kind of like they took that approach of, okay, Duke Miles, okay, Tyler Tanner, you go get yours, that's fine, but we're gonna dominate every other aspect. And it feels like a blueprint now on how you can compete against Mark Byington's team.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And just physicality as a whole. I mean, watching a good bit of the Arkansas game the other night, just even the Darius Acuff just physically, I felt like had his way at times with Tyler Tanner. Just was able to get downhill and get good shots around the rim against him. And it's not that Tyler Tanner was just horrible offensively or anything, but made life difficult on him. And I think anybody would have been able to tell you. And then that's why Vanderbilt was undefeated and not talked about in the same light as Michigan and Iowa State and some of these, other top teams. It's just because there were questions about their front court size. There were questions even about their positional size in the back court. They hadn't lost. They hadn't necessarily played a ton of really difficult teams. So you didn't know. You didn't want to say for sure that they're not a true, top 5 team that you feel like can win a national championship. To me, I feel like we've seen that now that they're probably not quite in that class. Doesn't mean they're not good. Doesn't mean they can't make a Final Four. It's hard to win on the road against good teams in the SEC. And certainly even losing to Florida at home in a game that was really, really close, there's not a whole lot of shame in that. But you're just starting to see some flaws, and you're starting to see that Vanderbilt, like everybody, what they do in the tournament, and in large part, is going to be matchup dependent, and there's going to be some matchups that are just not very good for them, and are going to put a lot of stress on their lack of size.
Yeah, most definitely. So that leaves us with 3 unbeaten teams: top-ranked Arizona, number 7 Nebraska. The Cornhuskers keep rising. And then number 25, Miami of Ohio. And I just got to give them some props. I've actually been paying attention to them here in the last week. And I'm a MAC guy now, Ryan. I'm loving my MAC basketball. But they've had to hit last-second shots in regulation in each of their last 2 games to send them to overtime. And then at least one of them, they hit a last-second shot to win the game in overtime. They are averaging 104 points per game in their last 3, and they're 20-0, and they've already beaten the top 2 teams that are chasing them in the MAC, and Akron and Kent State. Listen, I mean, it's not like Miami's going to go undefeated all the way to a national championship, but it's just fun watching a team that's a little undersized, and they're just bombing threes, and they're playing a different level of competition for the most part. But I think they're kind of a fun story right now in college basketball. Anytime you get to a point where you're still 20-0, you're undefeated after 20 games. In this day and age, that's something to talk about.
Yeah, it is. And there's someone I had, I was aware of them being undefeated in the non-conference play, but they played a very weak non-conference play. Obviously,
Right.
No Power Fives, and they played 3 Division II teams, or at least 3 non-Division I teams. But at this point, they're 8-0 in conference play. You said, Akron's, funny enough, 31 spots ahead of them on KenPom, and they won that game. So they're finding ways to keep on winning. And I think, the naysayers about their non-conference schedule, while when you're talking about them being undefeated, that's still fair. They've clearly proven themselves as, one of the better, mid-major type teams, and it'll be interesting, like what they drop 1 game here in the regular season and they lose in the MAC championship. Will they have an NCAA tournament case? All that stuff, I always think for mid-majors, or even kind of the in-between type leagues like the A10 or the American or the Mountain West, is always interesting to see. What the case is for some of these teams if they don't end up winning the league tournament and getting that automatic bid.
Yeah, I don't think the stars would align seeding-wise for Tennessee to play these guys, but this is a team I would not want Tennessee to see in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
I think maybe it was Lenardi's mock. There was some mock draft recently that had, or not mock draft, bracketology recently that had Tennessee playing them in the first round. So.
Oh, really? So like a 5-12, or?
I think it was a 5-12. Maybe it was a 6-11. But it's certainly possible. Just with where Tennessee's hovering at in the seeding.
Well, let's not buy tomorrow's trouble. That one, I'm just sitting there thinking about it, going, "Oh, Jesus, that would not be great." But anyway, some energy. You got to be, I know, a ball nerd to watch some of these MAC games, but it's been fun just checking out I'm not watching them beginning to end, but checking out the highlights. They're a cool story. Let's move back to the SEC, though. We'll kind of go through the Power 4 conferences, or 5 if you count the Big East, real quickly. The top of the conference seems to be taking a little more shape. Unfortunately, Tennessee's not in that top tier, but leading the way. I don't think it's a surprise. I think, Ryan, you even said it a couple weeks ago that this is your pick to win the conference in the end is Florida. They've won 5 straight. The guard play, by and large, getting better slowly but surely. What is undeniable, though, man, is this evolution of Ruben Chinyelu. In his last 4 games, he's averaging 18 points, roughly 18 points, almost 15 boards. 6.5 of those are offensive rebounds. I mean, that guy's a beast right now.
He is. You look at his rebounding percentages. I mean, I think it's basically him and Tobe Awaka as the two best rebounders in the country. And we saw it in the Tennessee game. He just added a little bit more offensively that he can do. Not that it's just a ton, but it's a little bit more than just cleaning up trash and dunking. So in a year where Alex Condon hasn't been quite as good as he was last year, as we're getting into SEC play, Chinyelu is very much making up for that, and it has been really good.
Yeah, most definitely. Texas A&M, you and I have talked about this. I mean, Tennessee is the culprit of giving them their only conference loss right now, but they've bounced back nicely from that loss. They're 5-1 also at the top of the SEC, and buckyball pesky and annoying as ever, but it's obviously working. They won a big one last night pretty easily against Mississippi State.
Yeah, rolled Mississippi State at home, which wasn't shocking to me, but I thought a really good win in Austin on Saturday in a game that they were about 5-point underdogs in, so not one that they were expected to win, and they're just solid. It's not a ton of star power on this team. It's not you don't see in any given game a lot of guys going off, but they're playing the system. They're getting production up and down the board, and you're clearly seeing, like Tennessee, you're seeing teams struggle with how to best attack and handle the full court pressure and the full court press.
Yeah. After those two teams, there's a group of teams at 4-2, Georgia, number 20, Arkansas, and now Kentucky. Kentucky's won 4 in a row, and I don't think they're fixed per se, but they're stacking some wins, and that's coming at a pretty important time for Mark Pope.
Yeah, they're finding a way to, like they did at Tennessee, come from behind and get wins. And in some ways, I think the injuries that they've had have been, I don't know if I would go as far as saying good for them, but it's forced them to play a little bit better offensive lineups, or at least lineups that can shoot the ball a little bit better and space the floor. And certainly they're shooting it much, much better over these last handful of games than they had for most of the season.
Yeah, most definitely. And then for all the praise, we've talked about them already, but, all the praise we had early for Vanderbilt, it's still a very good team, but the Commodores, they've slipped to a tie for 7th place. It just shows how quickly things can swing right now in college basketball at large, but also in the SEC. They have a 3-game losing streak. I think they play Mississippi State next, so presumably you would think that losing streak comes to an end. But again, man, it's not as lethal at SEC as we saw last season, but it's still going to be highly competitive with a lot of teams that I don't think there's maybe a couple easy games if you're playing them at home, but man, there's just not many easy outs for any team in this conference.
No, there's not. And, I would, and that's the thing is that's why what on Ken Palm SEC is still the top conference is that just the bottom is better than the bottom in most leagues, which again, like just exactly what you said, you're playing those bottom type teams at home. Those are relatively easy games, but you go on the road, they're just not givens. And I guess the one thing I would add with Vanderbilt is, I wouldn't, this to me is not the time to be selling Vanderbilt stock necessarily. It's a hard part of the schedule they just got through, and it's going to get a lot easier for them. You mentioned Mississippi State on the road on Saturday, Kentucky at home, Ole Miss on the road, Oklahoma at home, and then Auburn on the road, and A&M at home is the next 6 games for them. So obviously some of those games on the road, like we mentioned, are losable. But I would by no means would I be surprised if Vanderbilt rolls off a 6-0 stretch there, and in the middle of February, as they're getting ready to welcome Tennessee, that they're right back in the thick of the SEC race.
Yep, I agree with you. Let's jump over to the Big Ten, where the leader at the near halfway mark of their conference play is just like we figured, Ryan, Nebraska.
Yep.
They're at the top of the conference, 8-0 in conference play, obviously one of the 3 remaining undefeateds in college basketball. And then there's this conference going to be fun, at least at the upper levels, because there's a slew of teams right behind Nebraska at 7-1, including Michigan, Michigan State. Purdue got their first conference loss the other night against UCLA in Westwood, and then Illinois. And Purdue and Illinois are meeting this weekend. So, I mean, there's movement at the top is going to be guaranteed. The question will be, how long can Nebraska keep it going as an undefeated?
Yeah, it feels like, I think at this point Nebraska's proven that they're legit.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like they're national championship legit, and given how good the conference is, like it feels like you have to be national championship legit to win it. I do think it's Kylan Boswell suffered an injury for Illinois and is going to be out for a couple weeks. To me, that in the short term, their chances of winning the conference, that's just a huge blow. He's kind of the engine for them and does so many things. And we'll see who can step in and handle the ball more, and maybe that won't be as big as a loss as I think it might. But to me, he just is so important to a lot of what they do. So it's really interesting. I still would have Michigan have them as the favorite, but a lot of teams that are capable of winning the league, and they're almost at the halfway point. And like you said, you got 4 teams within a game of first place.
Yep. Yeah, moving over to the Big 12, that's the home of the number 1 team in the country in Arizona. And you were saying this a few weeks ago, Ryan, so I got to give you your credit. I think everybody needs to start recognizing number 6 Houston. They've won 11 in a row since that loss to Tennessee. And, man, they're, to me, looking as good as anybody right now in terms of, if you're thinking of like Final Four teams and stuff. I think another trip back to the Final Four could be very, very possible for this team.
The freshmen are getting better,
Yep.
Not just Fleming's. It feels like guys are getting more comfortable in their roles. What I would say with both the top 2 teams in the conference, in Houston and Arizona, they both, for what a good conference it is, had pretty manageable starts to Big 12 play. The win at TCU and the win at UCF, those are both really nice wins for Arizona, but not, they have not played, or excuse me, for Arizona, they have not played any of the real top line teams in the league. And Houston has good wins. They opened conference play. I think it was the first game they had in conference play against Texas Tech. That game was really, really tight late. They won at Baylor, but not a lot of matchups for them against each other, against BYU, against Iowa State, or even against Kansas yet. So it's going to be very homogenized, I think, at the top with some of those teams as they start to play more and more games against each other.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Arizona and Houston both undefeated so far in conference play, like you said. But in the next few days, you're right. They'll get put to the test once again. Houston playing at Texas Tech this weekend. Arizona traveling to Provo to play BYU on Monday night. And then Iowa State, who has hit some bumps in the road, like we mentioned, in Kansas, are also hanging around in the standings as well, as you kind of expect Kansas to. So it's kind of business as usual in the Big 12, like you said, but still very, very strong conference. As for
one thing I just made me think of it, I watched a lot of that on Friday night, that Kansas Baylor game, and it was, Cam Carr played really well too offensively, but Darren Peterson's performance was one of the more ridiculous ones I've watched from a guard, just from an efficiency standpoint. He played 23 minutes, scored 26 points, shot 11 of 13 from the field. He missed 2 shots from the field. He is just so smooth. I've been saying it since the beginning of the year. I know there's a lot of great players that project as really good pros in this class, but he's the guy. If I'm picking 1-1 in the NBA draft, he's the guy I'm taking.
I agree. Super smooth was what I was getting ready to say, and you said it too. He's really nice to watch. I don't want to get too hyperbolic, but and I've heard some other people mention this, but there's some shades of Kobe in him, the way he plays. I think maybe we associate his size with that too, because they're kind of similarly sized. But if he could be 80% of Kobe Bryant in the NBA, he's going to be a total star. So Yeah, they're good. Let's jump to the ACC quickly. As per usual, Duke, number 5 Duke, they're at the top of the conference, 6 games into ACC play. 2 one-loss teams behind them, Clemson and Virginia. And then you have to name off a bunch of teams that aren't North Carolina and Louisville before we get to North Carolina and Louisville. Currently in the standings, Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, they're all ahead of them in the standings. And North Carolina and Louisville are bunched up with teams like Stanford and a Syracuse team that we've said is not very good. They've both those teams, Ryan, North Carolina and Louisville, have each lost 3 of their last 5, and to me, they both look pretty vulnerable. And that, speaking of Louisville, I mean, we saw them firsthand with Tennessee, but the common denominator there is Mikel Brown. If they don't have him, they just are a very, very different team.
Yeah, I would say more worried about Louisville than North Carolina at this point. I just think they have very real flaws at this point. North Carolina, it's kind of the Mick Cronin thing, which I meant to mention that, obviously great win for them over Purdue. Obviously, of course, he spent 2 minutes complaining about the Big Ten after it.
Yes.
Which is just classic him. But North Carolina, too, they lost both their games on the West Coast road trip, Stanford and Cal, which, don't get me wrong, those are bad losses, games you should win. But that's just a continued theme that we're seeing with conference expansion is a lot of these teams on these road trips, just these long cross-country road trips, just struggle. So, and they bounce back with Notre Dame's not good, but they dominated Notre Dame last night. So I feel a little bit better about North Carolina. And then a team I think I said I was the most interested in. I think I might have had them as like my dark horse team in the ACC when we did our conference previews. Virginia, who dropped their first game on New Year's Eve in double or triple overtime against Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, and they've rolled off a bunch of wins in a row since at NC State, at Louisville, at SMU. Those were that's the middle of the league right there. And that kind of next class you're talking about. They look really, really solid, and just a fantastic job Ryan Odom's done in year one. And I don't think they're truly going to challenge Duke for supremacy in the league, but I do very much feel right now like that's the second best team in the conference.
Yeah, they're playing well, and they'll have an interesting one this weekend with North Carolina coming into town, into Charlottesville. So it should be interesting. Let's put a bow on these conference roundups with the Big East. UConn continues to run the table. No surprise there. They're on a 14-game winning streak. They're 8-0 in conference so far. Speaking of winning streak, St. John's has won 5 straight. They're the only team in legit striking distance at the moment. But that said, old friends, and we've mentioned this before. I think, Ryan, you mentioned Creighton a couple weeks ago. Villanova and Creighton are starting to put wins together, and they could prove to be a factor in the conference. We've been saying this conference is down, but there's still some pretty good basketball happening. And then lastly, I would say, how about Seton Hall, who I was talking them up a couple of weeks ago. They even got ranked in the top 25, and they proceeded to lose 3 straight in conference. So some regression to the mean maybe for Seton Hall. Yeah,
and that was what I was going to say. They played St. John's on maybe that was Tuesday night. Sometime earlier this week, I watched a good bit of second half, and I'm impressed by St. John's. It was at home, but their ability to come back. Seton Hall led for a lot of that game, and then St. John's put it on late and was able to get a big win. So again, you said it. It's UConn and the rest. Creighton, I feel like it's with good coaching that they're just finding ways to win games at a conference. It's not great. Checking in on Providence and former Tennessee assistant Kim English, just a brutal one for them on Monday night, lost in overtime to a bad Marquette team that's
God.
I mean, the bottom of the Big East is terrible. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I truly say they're the worst team in the league, but they're pretty bad.
Yeah. I thought Georgetown might be on a bounce back year, and now they've lost 6 straight in conference. They're at the bottom of the conference now.
Yeah, and Providence, I felt like, they lost their first 2 games in Big East play. Butler was back there before Christmas, that crazy great game in double overtime that they lost, had like 20 lead changes. Then they lost close to Seton Hall. You're saying, all right, it's one of the better teams in the league. They turn around and beat St. John's in Madison Square Garden. And then, I can't remember if we last recorded, we might have talked about this. It's obviously been a minute. They had UConn beat, and they just gagged that game away late. And it felt like you get that game.
Yep.
you're going to be 2-2 in ACC play or a Big East play. Your first 2 losses were games you didn't necessarily play that bad, but they let that one get away and have lost. They did beat Creighton on Friday night at home, but lost 3 out of 4 since, and it just doesn't feel like things were going in the right direction for them. Road trips to UConn and Villanova coming up after a home game at Georgetown Saturday, so it's not necessarily going to get a lot better in the standings for them.
Yeah, Godspeed. Well, that kind of wraps up what's in the rearview mirror. Looking ahead, we're not going to go through all these games, but man, a lot of big matchups this weekend. And for some of us who might be stranded weather-wise, hopefully you have power and you can watch some college basketball because, obviously Tennessee at Alabama's top of mind for us Saturday night at 8:30, but also on Saturday, Ryan, number 21 Georgia at Texas, Auburn at number 15 Florida, North Carolina at Virginia, like we mentioned, Illinois at Purdue, Houston at Texas Tech. And then there's nothing on Sunday, and I guess that's to pay homage to the NFL. But then on Monday night, 2 huge matchups, potentially. Number 23, Louisville at Duke, and then number 1, Arizona at number 13, BYU. So it's starting to take shape, like I said, as we get closer and closer to February and then March.
Yeah, Houston at Texas Tech, to me, the most interesting game.
We
talked about that a little bit earlier. Houston won a very competitive game against them earlier this month at home. And then in the SEC, I'm really, to me, the most interesting game is Georgia at Texas. Georgia, big win at Missouri earlier this week. It continue, when we're looking at teams in that class, it's a lot of can you beat the NCAA bubble level teams on the road, and a Texas team that's certainly playing a little bit better. As of late, despite losing to Kentucky and A&M back-to-back. But it feels like they're in a better spot than they were when they came into Knoxville a couple weeks ago. So that's a game I'm really intrigued by in the conference.
And I'm marking it down. Mark the tape. I'm saying Arizona goes down at BYU on Monday night.
Okay. I like it. I like that call.
It's not a shocker by any stretch.
No.
But still, Arizona's just due. They're a great team, but nobody's going to go undefeated. I don't buy it. So, all right, that does it for this week. We will be back next week, of course, with more to talk about. We'll recap the Vols games in Tuscaloosa and Athens. Hopefully at least 1 win, maybe 2 if we're lucky, along with previewing the next opponents that come to Knoxville, which will be a schizophrenic Auburn team and a gritty Ole Miss squad. And then, of course, all the other big-time matchups in the SEC and across the country. Ryan, thank you as always. Really look forward to doing this with you each week and look forward to getting with you again next week.
Yep, enjoyed it. And, we'll see if we'll have maybe a little bit better Tennessee news to talk about in a week.
Let's hope. And to all of you out there watching and listening, thank you very much for giving us some of your time. Have a great college hoops weekend. Stay safe out there. And we'll see you next time with a brand new episode of the RTI Rim Runner.